Ed Martin here on the Pro America Report, and our next guest is, I don't know that I've had him on the show before, but I've read his stuff. He's the president of the National Taxpayers Union, Pete Sepp, and I can't remember, Pete, one of your staffers years ago, really good guy, was very helpful in Missouri. I think I was working for the governor of Missouri, and we were doing some things to try to get a grip on what was going on. If you don't know the National Taxpayers Union, you need to check it out because they do great research, especially. They follow a lot of these issues. It's NTU.org. NTU.org. I'm looking at some of the op-eds and things that are posted there. It's a really helpful organization. So welcome, President of the organization, Pete Sepp. How are you, sir?
Doing well, thank you. And alum, so really love the state of Missouri.
Oh, great. That's great. Yeah, Webster's great. And Webster University does not get enough attention for having been about 25 or 30 years ago ahead of the curve in making it possible, especially, I don't know if you were in the military, but military men and women could get enrolled there, and they do some in person, and women could get enrolled there, and they do some in person, some off campus, different things. And they have incredible alumni network. That's really impressive. I'm glad to know that. Thank you. All right. Hey, we talked with Congressman Pete Sessions about how crazy this $3.5 trillion spending bill is, but he was mostly talking about the politics of it. You have to raise a debt ceiling. What's in this thing? I mean, it's a lot of money, but even Nancy Pelosi the other day, I think she said the old Pelosi shuffle, which is, we don't really know what it all means. We just got to pass it still. And what is in this? What's the reality of this thing?
Yeah, there are a lot of specific provisions, a lot of very vague ones. The specific ones, about $2 trillion worth of tax increases, making the 20% small business deduction that was enacted in 2017 highly limited by income and eligibility restrictions. It means increasing the basic capital gains tax rate from 20 to 25%, 29% if you count the surtaxes. It means hiking the corporate tax rate from 21 to 26.5%. It's instituting a new tax on vaping products. And of course, a lot of people use vaping products to quit smoking. So that seems a terrorist-guided proposal. It would also create heavier death tax burdens by peeling back some of the exemptions that were enacted in 2017. There's also a new methane fee on natural gas producers in the House's version of the reconciliation bill that Congressman Sims was talking about. And the problem there, of course, is that you can call it a fee, but it's really just a tax. And it's not a tax on producers. It's a pass-through that's going to raise the price of natural gas on consumers, and they're already worried about home heating and home energy costs because natural gas as well as gasoline prices are going way up. Those are just some of the specifics, and of course, $2 trillion leaves about $1.5 trillion in deficit spending that would need to occur just to meet the advertised price tag of this bill, and the advertised price tag is really smaller than the actual price tag. That's important to remember too.
How many things in this would you say, again, we're talking with Pete Sepp, the president of the National Taxpayers Union, how many aspects of this are really not known to us? In other words, these kinds of grants of authority to do something that we won't really know and can't really even measure. Is there a lot of that in here?
Yes, and the single biggest worry for us as a taxpayers organization is that this bill currently takes barely more than a paragraph to explain $10 50% budget increase for the Internal Revenue Service. It essentially says, here's the money. This is going to be used for increased tax enforcement with the goal of raising more uncollected tax revenue that currently the IRS is apparently not able to get. Well, in that very brief language, there's a lot of mischief, a lot of concern. How many agents will be hired? Will the IRS claim new powers, for example, to snoop in Americans' bank accounts? That's a big deal right now. There's talk that American accounts having the churn annually of $600 or more in their accounts would be subject to new scrutiny by the tax agency. They'd be able to look at all of your transactions over the course of a year if you engaged in $600 of inflow and outflow. Well, that's everybody. Anyone who gets a directly deposited paycheck or has credit card bills paid out of the account or happens to get interest earnings on the bank account. That's easily something that you would see as activity in a bank account of virtually every American. It would be a massive amount of information. And with that information comes the potential for abuse. And I don't just mean deliberate abuse. I mean bureaucratic abuse. With that much information and data in the hands of a tax agency that has some of the oldest computer systems in the federal government, the possibility for errors, false tax due notices, people might just pay because they don't want to challenge the IRS, that multiplies 1,000-fold.
Again, we're talking with Pete Sepp, the president of the National Taxpayers Union. If you go to NTU.org, you'll see lots of the research, lots of the writing. I know, Pete, that your job is to break these things down, and NTU stands there and says, hey, this is what this would do. But you have to, and I think when you do that, you're saying, and this wouldn't necessarily be good, right? I mean, in other words, you're to shine a light on what's happening or what's being proposed, as opposed to some groups are pure advocacy where they're saying do this or don't, vote this way or vote that way. So being careful about that role, the balance you play. What do you think the state of play is? Because when you show all this stuff like you have, again, it's ntu.org. You can see lots of the information, and Pete Sepp is published all over. People are going to go, whoa, I don't want that. And you're seeing, Sinema and Manchin saying some things about the size and scope of this that sound like they've read your stuff. You have other members of the Senate and House saying, hey, what about all this? What is your sense of the state of play? And are you worried that maybe they won't do the Cadillac of destruction, but they'll do a Prius and it'll still be a $1.2 trillion a mess? What do you think about where we're headed?
Yeah, there is a concern, and I think it comes from many of the budget gimmicks that we're seeing proposed. Speaker Pelosi was mentioning, for example, that, well, if we're going to expand some of the child payments that are in the bill that are supposed to help moderate income families, instead of paying $500 billion over 10 years for this, why don't we just make the provision last for 5 years and hope that it'll be so popular it'll be renewed by a future Congress? And suddenly you cut the proposed price tag of this thing in half. Well, you don't really do that. All you're saying is that you're going to have the provision be temporary with a wink and a nod, and it'll get enacted by another Congress and extended in perpetuity. So that's a big budget gimmick. Another one I've heard just today is that members of Congress are thinking, well, why don't we exclude the cost of tax credits that are refundable? In other words, if you get back more money than your actual tax liability difference that's coming directly out of the U.S. Treasury, let's just call that a revenue loss instead of spending, and we'll shrink the price tag of the bill that way. Again, another gimmick. A refundable portion of a tax credit is not the taxpayer's own money coming back to them. It's someone else's money.
We're talking with Pete Sepp, and Pete at NTU.org is the best place. I'm looking here now, and I want to make sure, is there a particular place to look there that you say on what's exactly in this bill? I'm trying to make sure I put up, because I want to put up, I see one of them is from Andrew Wilford for your team, but where do you recommend on the NTU page?
I would go to NTU.org/no Biden taxes. That's no President Biden's last name, no Biden taxes. And that will take you to a central landing page about the reconciliation bill and some of the things that people need to be aware of.
That's the one. I did see that. That's what I was trying to find, and I didn't see it on the front. Good. That's perfect. Very good. Okay. Well, listen, Pete Sepp, I appreciate it very much. NTU.org is the website. The NTU.org / no Biden taxes.
Yes.
Okay, no Biden taxes, and we'll keep you on auto dial so we can get an update on this. I appreciate it very much, sir.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Take care.
Ed Martin here on the Pro America Report, and our next guest is, I don't know that I've had him on the show before, but I've read his stuff. He's the president of the National Taxpayers Union, Pete Sepp, and I can't remember, Pete, one of your staffers years ago, really good guy, was very helpful in Missouri. I think I was working for the governor of Missouri, and we were doing some things to try to get a grip on what was going on. If you don't know the National Taxpayers Union, you need to check it out because they do great research, especially. They follow a lot of these issues. It's NTU.org, NTU.org. I'm looking at some of the op-eds and things that are posted there. It's a really helpful organization. So welcome, president of the organization, Pete Sepp. How are you, sir?
Doing well, thank you. And alum, so really love the state of Missouri.
Oh, great. That's great. Yeah, Webster's great. And Webster University does not get enough attention for having been about 25 or 30 years ago ahead of the curve in making it possible, especially, I don't know if you were in the military, but military men and women could get enrolled there, and they do some in person, some off campus.